My family decided my long-planned vacation was free childcare, then showed up at my door with bags. "Hi, I'm Evan Miller, I'm 35, and last month my family decided my vacation was actually a childcare solution they forgot to ask permission for." I'd been counting down to spring break like a kid counts down to Christmas. Not metaphorically. Literally. There was a red X on my wall calendar for every day leading up to it. Flights booked. Time off approved. Bags half-packed. I work logistics near the airport in Phoenix, which means long shifts, rotating weekends, and a phone that never really stops buzzing. Real time off doesn't happen by accident. You plan it like a military operation. My sister Rachel knew all of this. She'd known for months. I talked about the trip too much, honestly. Cheap flights I snagged at 1 a.m. The beach rental split 5 ways, how we'd have to leave for the airport before sunrise. She nodded, asked questions, even joked that I deserved the break. Not once did she hint that my plans were inconvenient. That's important. Because the night everything blew up, she didn't ask me for help. She announced it. We were at my parents' house, halfway through dinner. Plates balanced on knees, TV murmuring in the background, her kids running laps between the couch and the hallway. Rachel leaned back, sighed dramatically, and said her sitter had fallen through for spring break. Then she added casually, like she was commenting on the weather, "So Evan will just watch the kids that week?" No question mark. No eye contact. Just, decided. My parents both turned toward me at the same time. Waiting. Like this was a formality. Like my trip was a rough draft they'd all quietly agreed could be edited. Something in my chest locked up. Not anger. Not yet. More like that moment before a roller coaster drops, when you realize there's no getting off. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't fill the silence with a yes. I said, "No. I'm still going on my trip." The room went still in that unnatural way it does right before someone tells you who you're supposed to be. Rachel's smile vanished. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom leaned forward like she was about to negotiate a hostage situation. That was the moment I crossed an invisible line my family had drawn years ago without telling me. And they were not about to let it go quietly. The thing my family never understood was that Rachel hadn't just asked for help once or twice. She'd been treating me like a built-in backup system for years. It started small, the way these things always do. When her first kid was born, she'd call and ask if I could swing by for an hour so she could shower or run to the store alone. I said yes because that's what decent brothers do. An hour turned into an afternoon. An afternoon turned into entire evenings where I was parked on their couch watching cartoons while she and her husband stayed out late. Just grabbing dinner. At some point, my presence stopped being a favor and became an assumption. My parents helped that shift along. They loved telling people how great with kids I was. How reliable. How flexible. Flexible was their favorite word. Flexible meant I lived alone. Flexible meant I didn't have kids of my own. Flexible meant my time was apparently worth less than everyone else's. Over the last year, I'd tried to pull back. I stopped answering every call. Let a few texts sit. Told Rachel I couldn't babysit on work nights when I had early shifts the next morning. She didn't take it well. The messages got shorter. Sharper. She stopped asking and started informing. One night should have warned me. I was logging into a mandatory online training for work when Rachel called, already panicking. Her backup care had fallen apart, she said, and she was halfway out the door. Before I could even respond, there was a knock at my apartment. 2 kids. 2 backpacks. Just delivered. I took the training on mute while handing out snacks and breaking up fights over a tablet. Rachel picked them up 3 hours later, cheerful and exhausted, thanking me like she'd borrowed a phone charger instead of my entire evening. That was when I finally told her I needed notice. At least a day. My job didn't work on emergencies she created for herself. She nodded. Said she understood. A week later she texted, You're the only one I trust with them. It didn't sound like a compliment anymore. It sounded like a warning. So when I sat in my parents' living room, staring at everyone waiting for me to cave again, I knew exactly what they were really asking. They weren't asking me to babysit. They were asking me to confirm that nothing in my life mattered more than keeping theirs running smoothly. I said no anyway. That's when my dad stepped in. He asked why I was being selfish. Why I was choosing a vacation over real responsibilities. My mom tried to soften it, said we could figure something out if I was willing to be flexible. Flexible again. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my jacket, said I was leaving, and walked out with my hands shaking so badly I had to sit in the car for a minute before I could drive. I thought that was the hard part. I was wrong. Because the next morning, they decided to bring the problem to my front door. I woke up before my alarm the next morning with that tight, wired feeling you get when you know something bad is about to happen but you don't know exactly how. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The early light coming through the blinds made everything look flat and unreal, like a paused video. I was halfway through making coffee when I heard the elevator stop on my floor. Then voices. Small voices. The sound hit me before I fully processed it. Shoes scuffing. A bag dragging against the hallway carpet. Then a knock. Not the polite kind. The familiar one. The one Rachel always used, like urgency itself had hands. I didn't open the door. The knock came again, harder this time. Something thumped against the wood. Backpacks. Through the peephole, I saw them lined up neatly against my door. Two small heads. Rachel standing over them, jaw clenched. Her husband beside her, hand on a suitcase handle like they were dropping off luggage, not children. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it was pressing against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment every yes I'd ever given had trained them for. I didn't shout. I didn't knock back. I didn't engage. I slid the envelope I'd prepared the night before under the door. Inside was a single page. No explanations. No apologies. Just boundaries and consequences. It stated clearly that I was not providing childcare during spring break. That leaving children unattended outside my apartment would be treated as abandonment. That I would contact building management and request a welfare check if it happened. I watched their feet shift as they read it. Rachel's voice rose first. Sharp. Accusatory. Something about family. About loyalty. About turning a private issue into something official. Her husband joined in, lower but tense. The kids looked up at them, confused, backpacks still on. My hands were shaking, but I didn't move. Eventually, the tone changed. Zippers rasped. Fabric scraped. The backpacks were lifted instead of left behind. Footsteps moved away. The elevator doors closed with a dull clatter. When the hallway went silent, I unlocked the door just long enough to retrieve the crumpled envelope they'd shoved back. Then I locked it again. I sat down on the floor with my back against the door and laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because the alternative was breaking down completely. They had finally tried to force my hand. And for the first time, I hadn't folded. After the hallway went quiet, the adrenaline didn't leave right away. It just shifted. Settled into my hands, my jaw, the back of my neck. I stood up slowly, like I might set something off if I moved too fast, and locked the deadbolt again even though it was already locked. Then I did something I'd never done before. I documented everything. I took a photo of the empty hallway. Another of the backpacks no longer there. One of the note in my hand, edges bent, ink slightly smudged from being folded and unfolded too many times. I didn't know exactly why I was doing it yet. I just knew I needed proof that this wasn't in my head. An hour later, I walked downstairs to the leasing office. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say in the elevator, but when I got there, the words came out calmer than I expected. I told the front desk staffer what had almost happened. About the kids. The hallway. The argument through my door. I showed the photos. I showed the note. She didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked. She nodded and said, "You did the right thing." That sentence hit harder than anything my family had said in years. She explained the building policy. Residents aren't required to accept responsibility for minors they didn't agree to watch. Children can't be left unattended in common areas. If someone tries, staff is supposed to step in. If staff isn't available, residents are supposed to call for help. Procedure: clear. Neutral. No guilt. She filed an incident report and asked if I'd be out of town soon. When I told her yes, she wrote down the dates and said they'd flag my unit just in case anyone tried again. Walking back upstairs, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because someone outside my family had validated me. Heavier because it had taken rules and paperwork to do it. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Rachel said I'd embarrassed her. My dad said I'd gone too far. My mom said this should have stayed inside the family. I read every message once. Then I typed one reply in the group chat. "I'm not discussing childcare anymore. My plans are set. Please don't come to my door again." I muted the thread and put my phone face down. That night, I pulled my suitcase out of the closet and packed like my life depended on it. Each folded shirt felt like a small act of defiance. Each zipped pocket felt like a promise I was finally keeping to myself. For the first time, spring break didn't feel fragile. It felt locked in. The days leading up to my flight felt strangely split, like my body was at work but my mind was still standing in that hallway. I answered emails. I moved shipments. I nodded through conversations with coworkers arguing about seat assignments and carry-on sizes. On the outside, everything looked normal. On the inside, I kept replaying the image of those backpacks lined up against my door like they were a claim on my life. 2 days before I was set to leave, an email from the leasing office landed in my inbox. It was written in that careful, formal tone people use when something might matter later. It summarized the incident, referenced camera footage, restated the policy about minors in common areas. It confirmed, in plain language, that I had never agreed to provide childcare and that staff would respond if a similar situation occurred while I was away. No judgment. No opinions. Just facts. I saved the email. Took a screenshot. Put it in the same folder as the photos. That night, my sister sent another long message. Longer than the others. I didn't open it. I already knew the shape of it. Exhaustion. Sacrifice. How alone she felt. How I had chosen myself. She wasn't wrong about that part. The night before my flight, I packed the last few things. The zipper on the suitcase closed with a final, satisfying sound. I set my alarm for before sunrise and scheduled a ride to the airport. My boarding pass was already printed and tucked into my backpack next to the folded note. I slept badly but deeply, like someone who's been holding tension in their body for too long. Morning came fast. I dressed quietly, checked the deadbolt out of habit, and paused for a second by the door. The apartment looked exactly the same as always. No toys. No bags. No signs that anyone had tried to test the boundary again. Outside, a plane passed low over the building, the sound rolling through the sky like an invitation instead of background noise. The ride to the airport was uneventful. The driver chatted about early flights and security lines. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't look. I watched the city slide past and felt the distance grow. By the time I sat at the gate, surrounded by strangers and their luggage, my family's expectations felt smaller than they ever had. When the plane lifted off, Phoenix shrank beneath the wing. And for the first time in years, no one could knock on my door. Spring break didn't fix my life. It just gave me a week where my name wasn't shorthand for free childcare. I slept in without keeping one ear tuned for my phone. I drank coffee slowly instead of standing at the counter ready to be interrupted. I spent long afternoons with friends who knew me as a person, not a resource. No one asked if I was available later. No one assumed my plans were optional. The quiet was louder than any apology I never got. Out of habit, I checked the family group chat once. It was full of long messages about duty and loyalty, and what it meant to be there. I read the first few lines, felt that familiar pull to explain myself, then closed the app. Ignoring it didn't feel like running away. It felt like refusing to stand in a courtroom I'd never agreed to enter. When I got home, my apartment looked exactly the way I'd left it. The leasing office had slipped a final copy of the incident report into my mailbox. I read it standing in the hallway. Dry language. Neutral tone. Confirmation that I had never consented to any of it. That piece of paper gave me a kind of validation my family never had. Rachel stopped coming to my door after that. She shifted to talking about me at dinners I wasn't invited to. From what my parents later repeated, she framed herself as exhausted and abandoned. A mother carrying everything alone while I chose myself. When my parents brought up the building policy and the risk she'd taken by leaving the kids in the hallway, the tone changed. For the first time, consequences weren't just something I imagined. They were real. Documented. Over the next few months, the roles rearranged themselves. My parents started planning their own visits. The group chat went quiet on my end. I blocked it and kept a smaller thread open with my parents only, with one rule. If the conversation turned into a discussion about my choices, I stepped back. And I did. At first, it felt lonely. Like I'd walked out of a noisy room and the silence was too big. But over time, it felt honest. For years, I thought love meant absorbing whatever other people couldn't handle. Every time I said yes against my better judgment, I taught them my time didn't cost anything. Saying no didn't change who they were. It changed what I was willing to carry. The quiet didn't stay dramatic. It settled into something more ordinary, and that was what surprised me most. Weeks passed. Then months. Life filled the space my family used to occupy. Work stayed busy. I picked up a weekend hobby I'd been putting off for years because I was usually helping out. Turns out I actually like having Saturdays that belong to me. Who knew? My parents tested the boundary a few times. Nothing explosive. Just small comments slipped into conversations, like weather updates with an agenda. Rachel's been really tired lately. The kids miss you. She could really use the help right now. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just said, I'm not available. And changed the subject. The first few times, my chest tightened like I was bracing for impact. But nothing happened. The world didn't end. No lightning bolt came down to punish me for not fixing everything. That was new. Eventually, they learned that pushing meant I stepped back entirely. A few unanswered calls did more work than any speech I could have given. Silence, it turns out, is very educational. Rachel never apologized. I didn't expect her to. From what filtered back to me, she rewrote the story in rooms I wasn't in. In her version, I became distant. Cold. Someone who changed. Someone who chose himself. She wasn't wrong. What she left out was how much of myself I'd been giving away before that. How tired I'd been. How often I'd rearranged my life so she didn't have to rearrange hers at all. One afternoon, months later, I caught myself automatically reaching for my phone when it buzzed. That old reflex. That readiness to jump. It was just a delivery notification. I laughed out loud in my kitchen, standing there alone, because for the first time I realized how deeply trained I'd been to respond to urgency that wasn't actually mine. That training had taken years. Unlearning it took boundaries. And boundaries, I was learning, are quiet. They don't shout. They don't convince. They just exist, and let other people react however they're going to. I used to think setting boundaries would feel powerful. Like slamming a door or making some big, dramatic declaration. It didn't. It felt small. Awkward. Lonely sometimes. But it also felt honest. My family still talks about loyalty and sacrifice. They still frame generosity like it's a debt that never gets paid off. I don't argue with that anymore. I just don't live inside it. What changed wasn't them. It was me finally believing my own time mattered. For years, I confused love with availability. I thought being good meant being endlessly reachable. Every yes taught them my plans were flexible, my needs optional, my life adjustable. Saying no didn't punish anyone. It protected something in me that was burning out quietly. Now, my apartment stays quiet when I want it to. My calendar belongs to me. When I take time off, it actually feels like time off. And when someone snaps their fingers and expects me to rearrange my life, I don't feel the pull anymore. I feel clarity. Family can be a source of comfort. But it can also be the place where your generosity is treated like an obligation. When that happens, choosing yourself will always look selfish to the people who benefited from you never choosing yourself before. It's quieter now. Sometimes lonelier. But it's mine. My time belongs to me again. My peace does too. And that turned out to be worth protecting.